be Perashat Pinehas. I'll be back. So we're going to study on Shabbat morning the sughya about Don Quixote, the one that Don Quixote preserves, Cervantes preserves. It's based on Aham Faur's article, Miguel de Cervantes, Talmudist y mucho más, right? But when you see the actual sughya, it's pretty good. And the actual text in Quixote.
The man with the cane.
Yeah, so we have a saying in Judeo-Spanish, which I don't think you have in Arabi, which is lodos con caños, which means the mud people, means like nishchin, with canes. Because the Mishnah in Massekheth Kelim describes all sorts of ways that people make rama'ut carrying canes. They hide metal in them, and so in Mekah Memkar, they tilt the scale, or if they're an ani, they pretend that they're parched and they don't have water, but they hide it inside the cane, or they go to a house asking for tzedakah. When the people from the house go to get them food and so on, they steal the mezuzah and they stick it in the cane. So there was a rabbinic bias. Hello, Elliot. Rabbinic bias against people with canes. So we preserve that in Judeo-Spanish. So if you say low people, you say lodos con caños. Oh, mira los lodos con caños, right? Even if they're not wearing holding canes. But it's a different connotation than, or we were more shrewd, let's say. So that's 3, all right. And now, so let me know when we should start. This is the sughya on the screen. Let me just put in the structure and then we'll be done. Let's see.
Is this an updated version here, this Word doc?
It is, yes. Slightly updated, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
We can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. So go ahead and turn on record. Let me just fill in. Give me a minute to fill this in. So I see, right. So this is 1. And then this goes with 2. This is 2. And then this is 3. So I'll put this here. Mahar is 3. This is 1. This is a sughya meshulesheth all the way. 2. Ki azal is 2. I think this is right, but we'll discuss it. And then 3 is this one. Okay. All right. So let's start at the beginning. So the beginning is actually Horizontal Society. Now let me see. Let me change the share. Just close the door. I'll be right back. Sorry, we're going to start now. Okay, sorry.
Does the new book preserve the appendices? Does anyone know?
What's that?
Look. They updated Horizontal Society with like the additional essays and additional editing.
The black volume.
Yeah. Did they include all of the appendices and keep the numbering?
I thought so. Yes, I thought so.
Okay, thanks.
I haven't checked, but I think they kept everything. 1 and 2.
Okay.
Okay, our August Abedin is here. Jordan Asumin. Usually he's in Miami. Thank you very much. Okay.
Hey, welcome, Jordan.
Hey,
You
Jordan.
have to stand in a row.
I don't see you, so I can't say good to see you, but good to be in your presence.
Yes, I'm here.
He's already sitting, so we don't have to stand.
There he is. Okay. I need a bigger camera. Okay. So let's start at Horizontal Society. I'm going to read like a page and a half, which gets us into this source. So, and this is about gale. What does gale mean? In rabbinic literature, the verb gale, so you can see this, right? Okay, good. The verb gale stands for removing a seal and uncovering a hidden object, like gilui Horayoth. You've heard that a million times. Sigitin, etc., etc. In the same vein, it is also used for divulging something to a friend or expressing formal consent to a neighbor for usage of the premise on Shabbat. That's for le'anyan ayruvin. So I don't think our current ayruvin work because you can't, negotiating with the town of Ocean is not sufficient to include to obtain the consent of all the residents. It's kind of like J.D. Vance negotiating with Iran as to what Israel should do in Lebanon, right? You're not a party to the agreement. So you really need maybe in the Ottoman Empire when the crown owned every city, maybe that was the case. Or the Turkish governor could say on behalf of Halab, I'm giving you Jews, I'm going to lease you or allow you to have some kind of ownership interest, maybe. But here in the U.S., I don't think so.
Right. I think their argument, for what it's worth, is because the government has eminent domain, therefore they can allow the eruv and implicitly give permission. Not.
Yeah. So any American lawyer, and I think Ray will back me up, will tell you a possible power that is not exercised doesn't grant you rights to deal with the real property now. If you want to, the Township of Ocean can declare eminent domain on everything, lease it back to the owners on 100-year leases, and then they would have technically the power, maybe, as landlords, to contract with people making a eruv. But in the absence of that, I think you can need the consent of the actual landlords, which we never get, or actual owners, which would be the goyim, right? Besides the fact that we're not using surat petah, we're using wires which are, I think, more than arsim amod high, which don't work. I remember the whole thing about Hanukkah is limited to arsim amod, so is Iruvin, so there's no hekera above, let's say 30 feet, let's call it.
Depends where. A lot of them are like lamppost height,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily taller than that. So you may have some that are lower, like in the city, they're not so
If
high.
you use a cord, it's not insufficient. It has to be able to
Right.
hold a half a brick, right?
Oh yeah, that part of it.
The height part, yeah, maybe some places. So anyway, that's the thing about Iruvin. A familiar expression in the Talmud Babli is God had elucidated, galera hamana. So when you want to, and what do? This means exposing an ambiguous feature or a factor in the law rather than leaving it to inference. So I didn't look this up, but this is probably a very fertile sughya in Pesachim 75a. What he's saying here is you don't have as much freedom for dinim muflaim if the sughya asserts galera hamana, what its intent was. If there's no intent openly disclosed, it's up to the interpretation of the Beit Din, like ayin tahad ayin, which is 100% a din mufla. Tahad meant in place of, and that was common in the Near East, right? The whole thing of ayin tahad ayin was to limit the punishment to the original injury. That's what it was. So it was a beneficial, but still it's brutal, and we rejected it. But that's because there's no galera hamana, what tahad means. So we say, oh, really? It means tashlumin. But if the pasuk is clear about something, or if it's possibly ambiguous, but we say galera hamana based on something, then it's harder to reinterpret it via dinim muflaim. But we do because Ben Sorero More is effectively erased, right? Now, I think the way they did that was they took terms which were not galera hamana and said, oh, the son has to eat this much meat and drink this much wine in the father's property, and the amounts were huge. such that only, people in the UFC would eat at an eating contest, right? But otherwise, so we made it effectively useless. We did the same thing for lo tochelu al haddam, but there we didn't even interpret it in a way consistent with the original mitzvah. We interpreted pieces for different halachot. So there's like 5 or 6 different contexts where you say lo tochelu al haddam. But galera hamana would preclude or make more difficult. It would put up more resistance to a din muflan. Therefore, I propose that gale in Horayoth 13b, which we're going to study now, stands for the publication of a text which hitherto had circulated privately. CF Appendix 40. The rabbis recount that 2 members of the yeshiva planned to show that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, this is the second, so he's the son of Rabban Gamliel de Yabne, who you may recall in Berachot 27, I think. He had a fight with Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehoshua about Tefillat Arit Reshut. And I'd like to study that one this summer also. And there was a whole hullabaloo, and they kicked out Rabban Gamliel. This time they didn't succeed, but that time they did. Replaced him with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and he was able to get through a lot of dinim muflaim that had been stalled in committee by Rabban Gamliel. One of them is that you recite Parashat Sisid at night. And that's described in the Haggadah. Right? That's the Dirasha Ben Zoma, which was against the majority, but originally, Hachamim Omrim, so you don't need Parashat Sisit at night. There's no Laila involved. There's Olam Hazeh, Yemod HaMashiach. But when Bo Bayom, on that day that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was made the sole and exclusive Nasi, they got through that legislation and some other things. So anyway, according to this, they wanted to show that he was not fit to serve as president, Nasi. According to the standard text, they planned to challenge his leadership by requesting him to publish Oqasin, Galelan Oqasin, a tractate unbeknownst to him. Well, we'll see what it means unbeknownst to him. To prevent a public humiliation, a big fadiha, a sage went to the archives, found the tractate, sat under Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel's study, which was in an attic, stretched the scroll, means open it up, unrolled it. Garas, he chanted in a fast pace, which is used to memorize the text, and then Tane, a longer chant used to examine and ponder about the meaning of the text. These correspond to Girsa and or Gamir and Savir, I would say. Right, so we have when in Idovin 72b, when Rabbi Elazar imported the Sifra and the Sifre from Berab in Babel, Rabbi Yochanan didn't know it. He got his hands on it, got us in, I think, 1 week, and
was it 3 days and 3 months?
Yeah, got us in 3 days and Tane in 3 months. That's exactly the same levels of analysis, right? One is you understand the words, you understand the structure, you're very careful about the phrasing, you get the phrasing right. And then Tane is like, now you understand the legal theory that's being explained. Okay, so now, whoops.
So this is like 150, 200 years before a formal Mishnah gets published.
Yes, so this is the father we're talking about of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, which is going to be clear from the third part of the sughya. The third part of the third part. So I don't know what year this was. It was not quite 150 years. I think the first Mishnah was in 180, published.
Mm-hmm.
And Rabbeinu HaKadosh started the project 25 years before that, probably in 145 or 155. I don't remember. Maybe he was born in he was 25 years old when they first produced the first Mahadorah of the Mishnayot. And then again, he was 55 when they produced the second one. So it was also 30 years apart. So this is maybe 60 years before that.
Mm-hmm.
So Rabbeinu HaKadosh is already born in the end of this sughya, and he's teaching his son. That's a later in time little snippet. Right, so now, to alert Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel that he was trying to convey an urgent matter, the sage went on and again garas and then tane the text for a second time. By the following morning, when an official request was presented to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel to publish Gales So that's the part that I don't see in the sughya. We're going to see, but I don't think he used the word gale. So either Haham Fa'ur found a different standard girsa, or I don't know. But in our girsa, you're going to see the printed one just has naite mor. What does he say? Naite mor.
Nitane Oqasin.
No, I think that's wrong. So I change it. Naite more means like to come. May more come up, yani. V'nitne be'okasin. Or v'nitne, you could say. V'nitne be'okasin. That's the way I read it. The verb pashat, to stretch, was used to denote the opening and unfolding of a scroll, see Yerushalmi Shabbat, etc. So this shows that this would be Yehuda, Yaakov ben Korsha'eh, could find an actual text of Oqasin written out in the scrolls because he had to open it up. This supports Harambam's position and about whether the Torah Sheba'al Peh was written. It also supports the Igeret Shirira Gaon Spanish version. And Yeshua Moshe Hazan he looked at the Spanish and the French. He spent his whole life studying Gaonic literature. He concluded that the French version is an adulterated version of the Spanish one, which is authentic, because the French, I don't know why even, but they had this fetish that the Torah Sheba'al Peh had to be passed only orally up until like 100 years before Rashi. And I don't know how you would do that. Yeshua Moshe Hazan in Iyeh Hayam, where he discusses this, says it's impossible. How do you do that? Even if somebody has a great memory, the students have to have the same memory, or they're going to keep coming back. We're going to be stuck on, the first chapter of Berachot for like 10 years because they memorize it, they work at it. It's all, they don't have anything to see. And then they come back and they make mistakes. We'll do it again. It doesn't make sense. It just absolutely doesn't make sense. An oral tradition is not literal. That's my problem with the yeshivot. They're literal, and they've been literal since the time of Rashi and Tosafot. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. It should be noted that the sage alerting Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel garas and tane the text twice, but he only pashat, stretched it once, since, as mentioned, this verb refers to the opening of the scroll, which he had to open only once. The pashat is an active verb, which has to do with interacting with a physical object. Garas and tane is like a mental verb. It's how you recite a text. The reading gale in the standard edition of the Talmud is not found in some manuscripts, which is the Paris one that I sent around. That's the National Library of France. Or in Levine's edition, he's the famous editor of Igeret Shirira Gaon. He gives you the double version, French, Spanish, side by side. Instead of which they read patach tana, patach tane. I didn't see that in the French one either. Maybe Haham was referring to Levine's thing, but I didn't see it in the French. And this reading is also found in Tishbot HaGeonim, Coronel, one of the earlier ones. However, in manuscript Munich, that's the only manuscript complete of the Talmud Bavli in Europe, is what they call the Munich manuscript, which was found in the Bavarian National Library in Germany. That is the one on which is based. Have you ever heard of? There's a Shinuyeh Girsaod made by, I think, Rabinowitz, not the one that's alive today or from Ma'ale Adumi, but an earlier one, like 150 years before. I forgot the name of his book, but he takes Shinuyeh Girsaod from primarily the Munich manuscript and gives you on each phrase in the printed Talmud what the Munich says, and it's often changed. So in Munich, it doesn't have what Paris has.
Diktuke Sofrim.
Yes, exactly right. Diktuke Sofrim. Excellent. So I'm inclined to believe that the standard edition bears the original version. And in the Constantinople edition of Igeret Shirira Gaon. So we were studying this Igeret Shirira Gaon right after the expulsion, right? That's why you had Hachamim in Turkey printing it, right? That has Gale. And now, why does he say it's wrong? That manuscript thing is wrong. Petach Tana, Petach Tane. The expression is not Talmudic and is found nowhere else in rabbinic literature. Probably a later copyist of the Igeret Shirira Gaon thought that Gale would be difficult for the average reader to understand because although it's not the same as Pashat, it suggests publishing a scroll which you have to unroll, right? Like Mechillah So there's two kind of megillot. There's Megillat Setarim, which is a scroll rolled up and still tied. It's like tied it on the bottom, the top, and the middle. And then a Megillah, which is published, is just a plain Megillah. So the Hamesh Megillot, which are in the Mikra, they were published in Ketubim. They weren't written. I mean, at Yabna, when they closed the canon, they had these scrolls. They just decided to make them Megillot instead of Apocrypha. That's all. Support for our interpretation is the statement in Erubin 53a, because Judeans published the tractate Galu Masechta Nitkayemat Toratam Beyadam. And if we have time, I'll pull that up on the screen. That's a very interesting set of statements. Namely, and by the way, if you look at it on Al HaTorah website, Rabbeinu Hananel, which is pretty good, the version they have. It's not great, but it's pretty good. He has a very clear pirush of that little snippet in Erubin 53a. Because Judeans
By
published...
the way, Chacham, I'm not sure you know, the Al HaTorah website is very good because it pulls in the Friedberg manuscripts and you could compare it kind of line by line.
They'll show you the printed versus the Friedberg version, all of the Friedberg?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh.
I'll show you afterwards.
Okay, very
It's
good.
very helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know where they got the Rabbeinu Hananel, but it's much better than the printed text. It's different than the printed text.
Mhm.
Okay. So namely, the fact that they published the text that was taught, making it available to everyone to further study and review it, and made it possible to master the tractate and not to forget it in the course of time. And there's something about Nisim Gaon, 58, okay. The idea of publishing the text before proceeding to analyze it underlies the method for teaching Talmud at the traditional yeshiva. As you get a Shira Gaon, and I don't know what this Likutim is, I didn't look it up yet. Before every Kala, we assemble the teachers, the Alufim. That's Milashon Yalif. That's Aramaic to teach, right? Like Ulpan we have today comes from that. And sages and the Hachamim. So the Alufim and the Hachamim and their Gorsim, the tractate to be studied at the Kala. And we further publish Megalim, another tractate that will be studied in the next Kala. So at each Kala, at the very beginning, they teach everybody the tune and the nikudot and the phrasing. So everybody's on the same page before we even go Be'ayun, what does it mean? That's a different approach. The purpose of publishing in advance the tractate to be studied at the next Kala was to ensure that the prospective students will be learning the correct text rather than memorizing a faulty student's vernacular version, which Shittefa, the Talmida'et, Talbisa'ef, Our makes a whole thing about that in a footnote in section 5. There were a lot of misspellings and bad girsalt circulating because some of the students had those, I don't know if it's students of the Geonim so much, but those circles outside the realm of the two yeshivot, outside the Geonic Andalusian world, because we know that Shemuel HaNagid was very wealthy. He would house young Hachamim in his house in Spain, and also he paid to have scrolls of the Talmud prepared for them. So I'm pretty sure that those scrolls were very accurate. I think these Shitefa, the Talmida'et Tarbisa'eh, that refers to the scrolls that students would copy among themselves from encounters with others who had been at the Yeshivot Babel, but not from the actual lesson in the Yeshiva. On these sorts of versions, see all of this is going to show you why all these comments show why they're inferior. I would like to mention in passing that a similar method was used in Sephardic and Oriental Yeshivot until recently. The teacher would first enunciate Gores, the text of the lesson. Next, the text would be repeated by an advanced student acting as his assistant. Query, is that the Sadrana? Maybe. After that, it would be recited over again and again by the entire class until all the nuances of pronunciation and intonation were mastered. Only then would the teacher begin to explain and analyze the text. So that's really how you're supposed to do it. And for some sugyot, Hacham Fa'ur would record the sughya for us. And then if he did that, though, he expected us to have it almost memorized and certainly pronounced well and all the phrasing correct, you know. And in most of these classes, even by rabbis in the community, they sometimes stumble through the text. It's like they didn't prepare it before. They prepared the ideas. They didn't prepare the girsa. That was
I'll say the recordings you sent were very helpful. I listened to them many times. So
good. Okay.
they achieved that purpose.
I might re-record now that I've delved into the sughya bi'ayun. It gets better and better, right? So that was the method by which the writer of these lines, that's Hacham Fa'ur, was initiated into the study of Talmud. Yeah, his teachers in Argentina, Eliyahu Suli and Shaul Frewen. Later on, I had the opportunity to learn that the same method had been used in other such schools, with the exception of Porat Yosef, which was never representative of the Sephardic tradition, Talmudic or otherwise. Their contempt for the study of Mikra may serve as an indicator. And then Hacham Fa'ur's article in Hebrew, which he wrote when he was very young. He was born in 34, so it was published when he was 44, but I think he wrote it like 10 years earlier. So that's enough of that. And now we'll go to the sughya. And by the way, I met Hacham Matlub's student, Abraham Ases, who's Leo Eses's father. And I asked him, how did you used to study Talmud with Hacham Matlub? Because he was one of three people that got the simicha from Hacham Matlub. Fa'ur, ABSS, and somebody else, I forget. And he recited to me the opening sughya in massekheth Gittin. And it was the same tune and the same phrasing, and he caught all the rhyme, because Gittin, the first Mishnah, has a lot of rhymes. Or maybe it was Perek HaMevi Get. Sorry, it was HaMevi Get, Mimidinat Hayam, Sadich Lamon, B'fanai Nechtab, B'fanai Nechtam. There's the over and over and over. You can't miss it. It's like a song, like a rap, you know? Okay, so let's go back now. Stop sharing, and we'll do the sughya itself. If you have any questions, Jordan, or comments, feel free to jump in. Okay, sughya meshulesheth. Here it's divided into three, and I believe each part itself is divided into three, so it's completely meshulesheth, perfectly. So we start out with a barata. Tanura Banan, you all know, it means it was accepted in all three yeshivot. By the time the editors of this sughya got to this job, it was accepted in all three yeshivot. Tanura Banan, and you're going to see it has two parts. Each part has three. So there's three official positions in the academy in Eretz Israel. That's the same Beddin Hagadol that produced the Mishnah. There was a Beddin Hagadol of all of Rabbeinu HaKadosh's ancestors, starting in Yabne, that's the Beddin of Yabne, starting with Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai and moving on through, he was a student of Hillel, all the children of, descendants of Hillel. There was three posts, Nasi, Abedin, number 2, and Hacham, number 3. What was the Hacham? I think kind of like parliamentarian, like I said when we studied this in Deal. Nasi nichnas, when the Nasi walks in, Kol ha'am omvin, ve'en yoshvim ad she'omer lahem shebu. Abedin nichnas, osin lo shura ahad mitkan, v'shura ahad mitkan, ve'en yoshvim ad she'esheb bimkomo. כשחכם נכנס, אחד עומד ואחד יושב, עד שישב במקומו. This is more or less restated in Hilchot Talmud Torah, I think chapter 6, halacha 7. So when the Nasi walks in, everybody has to stand up, and they can't sit down until he gives them the directive, sit down. The Abedin, who's number 2, they make 2 rows on either side of his path, and they don't sit until he sits, but they don't need his permission. And when the Chacham enters, it's like a wave. The Chacham comes within Arba'a Amot of you, you stand up, and you stay standing up until he seats in his place. So like there's like a line that at the end, beginning of it, people stand, and then more and more people stand as the Chacham walks through, and everybody sits down when he sits. That's 3. Now,
sorry,
what about, yes.
I would have read that as one person sits and
right,
then time is
right.
passing.
Yeah, right. The wave, that's right. That's the wave. So when he leaves you, Arba'a Amot of you, once you stood up for him, he enters your Arba'a Amot, then he goes away, another Arba'a Amot in the other direction. So really we're talking about like a an interval of 8 amot. Once he leaves that, then you sit down. And then, so there's always people standing and sitting. Very good. Thank you.
I have a question on the Girsa.
Yes.
So I know the other week you mentioned how the Paris version you found is very precise, save for that instance with gale. And that's what I've been reviewing and studying off of. I'm noticing a bunch of differences. I'm not sure if the reason you didn't record them in this Word doc is because like you didn't go through each one, or because you decided,
no,
those
number
weren't.
one, first option. So what do you see?
Okay. So some are small, like kol ha'am omedin veyoshevin, like it has with the nun. And then kishe'abetin, and ad yomar lahem shebu.
Okay.
And then kishe'abetin nichnas osin lo shete shurot. Shura achat mikan veshura achat mikan.
That's
So
better.
for this section, that's it. There's a handful of other smaller ones. They're mostly inconsequential in terms of content, but it's more about like flow. I'll point out any that come across. I sent a doc the other. Did you get a chance to look at it?
I did, but I didn't use it to edit this text.
Okay.
But I think I will after this.
Sure.
But you see why I like the Paris? It's much more, it's cleaner. It's fit, right? It's not.
Yeah, it's balanced well. Osin lo shete shuro. Like it, I don't know. It has a certain
That's
structure.
also how the Mishneh Torah has it as well, when he quotes it in Hilchot Talmud Torah.
Yeah, that's why. So I like the Paris because internally it flows better. It makes more sense. It sounds, if you're reciting it out loud, it works much better. But also, I see Rambam quotes from that kind of Girsa more. That's why I liked it. Why it doesn't have Gale, I don't know. Maybe that was the Geonim. Who knows? Okay, good. So then we had 3. Now we're going to have 3 about the children or students of Hachamim, which is another one layer removed from the Hachamim themselves, right? But they still get some kind of kavod. So Bnei Hachamim et Talmidei Hachamim bizman sherabim serichin lahem, probably says lahen, I'm guessing.
I don't remember about that one. I could check in a second, but it starts Bnei Talmidei Hachamim veTalmidei Hachamim. And it has that same thing for the next part as well.
So that's so the children and then the students. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
When everybody needs them, so they have some official function that they're serving the public, they're allowed to step over. But Rabbeinu Hanan has the kofsin, mekapesin. I like that better.
So this has what you have here, mafsi'ain.
So mekapesin al rashi ha'am is even more profound. It's a greater license, right? Mafsi'ain is you step. They're all sitting on the floor. So as you're coming in, you step over them or between the 2 shoulders where people are, right? Kofsin is even like if the guy's tall, you have to jump a little bit and you might fall on somebody. That's even greater license. So we give them that license. If you had to go to the bathroom, you may leave, but then you're allowed to return to your place. So you could actually step over the people twice, still legitimate. Of course, we need to legislate this because it feels a little ayib, right? But because you're Bnei Hachamim, or you're the students of the Hachamim, you have that right. So this is a special kind of Talmidei Hachamim, the fathers, that they're parnasim. That's a leadership position. It's like the committee. It's more than just being a Hacham. 2 options. So when they know how to process what the fathers are teaching, I believe they sit facing the fathers with their backs toward the people. If they don't know how to process what their fathers are saying, they still get the right to enter, just like we said up above, which includes stepping over people. but they sit behind the fathers. Imagine like there's a head table or a dais. So whether you sit in front of it or behind it with your faces toward the backs of your fathers, but your faces toward the people, depends on whether you're able lishma or not. The Bil Azar Bar Sadok, I got that from the Paris manuscript, not Birbi, but Bar Sadok. Omer, Aprid HaMishteh, Osim, Otam, Sinitin. Steinsaltz has an explanation that this is a special kind of flatware. It has like a fork on one end and like a spoon on the other. It's rather long. And that makes sense because this is extending the kabod to these people at a Bet HaMishteh, whereas everything up through this point is in the Bet HaMidrash. Harambam does not restate this. Why doesn't he? Even though the sughya down here makes a comment about it, apparently Rabbah has a comment about it. And still, he doesn't restate it. So we have to ask ourselves why. I don't know the answer yet. But how does he know from the sughya that that's not lehalacha? I don't know. Amar mor. Yasa l'sorech. More because we're going to see who wrote this, but the Baraita itself is bistam. So you don't. It's like the first Mishnah in Berachot. There's no one to quote. So you say Amar Mor Yasa Lesorech. Then we're going to have parts 2 and 3 are comments, 2 comments and 1 comment respectively on parts of this Baraita. All from the second half because it's less clear. There's more technical terms and there's more context. So we need comments to clarify it. The Amoraim had no need to comment on the first 3, which is all about the 3 official positions in the Bet Midrash and what do they do. Amar Rab Papa. So we have Rab Papa and Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab and Rabbah. Can anybody tell me what yeshiva we're in?
Pumbedita.
Very good, Pumbedita, but this Baraita came from Eretz Israel, as you're going to see. So this was recited, that's why Tanur Rabbanan is critical. This was also recited in Pumbedita. We here only preserve the discussion in Yeshivat Pumbedita. Amar Papa, La Amran Ela Liktanim, Abal Lirdolim. La, it's a la because he says La Amran, so I know we are in Aramit. This is an Amoraic comment. And Elliot, as you noted on my chat, now that you've read this, you understand Ketanim and Gedolim refers to severity of your bathroom visit. Ketanim is urinating. Gedolim is to empty your colon, right? Okay. So we said, Yasa l'sorech, if you have a need to leave, okay. So if you have to urinate, okay, you could come back, but you can't come back because you're going to be out a long time, right? So maybe people will reshuffle their positions and it's mafriya otam to step over them if you're coming back after like 15 or 20 minutes. And also for number 2, you have to go find a place farther away. So it could take a while. Why la? According to Rav Papa, because you should have checked whether you needed to go to the bathroom before you entered the Bet Midrash. Ya Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar le'olam yilamed adam asmo le'ashkimul ha'arib. This is from the Paris. Ve'la'asot tzeracha. Very important. Now we know what it's talking about. You should go to the bathroom in the early morning and late at night before you go to sleep, so that you're never in a situation in the day when you're with other people and you're in the shuk or whatever, you're walking on the road. Now you have to really distance yourself from all population to go to the bathroom. They didn't have regular bathrooms.
I have a question. You have a lot of language changes here. First, you have Amara Papa, then you have a phrase in Hebrew, then Aramaic, then the Amarab, Yehuda Amarab, Hebrew, and then Aramaic again.
That's right.
What's
So here's
going on
what's going on. The intro is Aramaic, and this is Aramaic, so it's an Amoraic comment, which is correct. But when you say La Amran, that means the Gezerah or the Tekana. It's always a rabbinic thing. They didn't say this rule except for A, but not for B. You use Hebrew because that you're kind of conceptually imputing that language to the Baraita itself. So you don't say that in Aramit, you say it as if it could have been written into the Baraita, right? So you could say, let's see, Yasa lesorech nichnas v'yoshev b'mkomo l'ktanim aval lo l'gdolim, like that. So it's like Hakika Amar. So Hakika Amar comes out of an Aramit discussion, but when they're speaking about the language they want to impute into or impute semantically, they use the same Hebrew. So your mind, it's like Ka'amar. Your mind goes back and fills in the blanks of the Tanaitic material. So you can, if in our tradition, which I'm going to call Geonic Andalusian, the whole entire basis of Chokhmah is how you understand and use language. That's why Bnei Yehuda were very careful. Hikpidu al lishonam. And the whole Moreh Nevuchim, the first third, the first book is all about language. Secondary, tertiary, quaternary, semantic meanings, which a certain pasuk or certain midrash is focusing on, and you have to know that, and you can't take it literally. So I feel that today all the vorts are super literal, and we have to be aware of that if we're going to teach our kids and get out of it. But we're surrounded, we're bombarded. Imagine you're bombarded by the mainstream media, and there's no Victor Davis Hanson, right? So we have to be the Victor Davis Hanson, making a few videos here and there, right, which a few people watch, right? But yeah, we have to reintroduce the Sephardic precision in language, right? We invented comparative Semitics in Spain, by the way, and the grammar. So, okay, we finished that. This is now in the printed text. It says Amarava, but the parish doesn't have that. In the printed text, they have it in parentheses. It doesn't feel like it's Amarava. It just feels like a kala statement bistam. This rule, no longer Rab Papa's rule, we're not going to adopt it. We're going to adopt it only either Katanim or Gedolim. You have the right to return to the Bet Midrash. Why? Because people are more sick, more ill. They have less control over their digestive system. So even if you are bodek before the class, something might happen. So then we relaxed that requirement. Here's the third part, another comment, one comment, right? This is two comments really, or two or three, but two, I think. And then here, Af Bil Azar Bar Sadok Omer, Af Bebet Hamishtaot Osim Otan Sinifin. This is a mahloket language. It's not Amar Bil Azar Bar Sadok, but it's Bil Azar Bar Sadok Omer, which means he says that's not it. The extent of this kavod extends outside the Bet Midrash, and so these special people get a special kind of fancy eating utensils. It's a sign of kavod at a Bet Mishteh. Amar Rabba, qualification, B'chaya Abihem, Ubifne Abihem. And as you pointed out, Elliot, this is redundant. Why do you need to say B'chaya Abihem if you say Ubifne Abihem? So I don't know. It could be even if the father died, but there is a event which he was always in charge of. Remember, these are the Talmidei Chachamim and Parnasim. Maybe the rest of that year he had a term as Parnas. I don't know. I'm just guessing. So Bifnei Avihem could exist even after he's dead in certain contexts where he was in charge of X, or like a Supreme Court justice dies. So you still, when you go to the Supreme Court during that year, that term of the court, you treat it as if he's still there, something like that. But I don't know otherwise. And let's see. I think Harambam doesn't, I don't know if he includes this. Let me just digress for a minute.
But either way, do you think it's in Hebrew here, B'chaya Abihim or B'fnei Abihim, for the same reason you said before, as if it would insert that text into the earlier Baraita?
Right. So you could easily just pick up this and paste it right after this.
Mm-hmm.
Rabbi is saying he's legislating. It's because he's in Pumilita in the year 300 some, and Bil Azab Bar Salok is in Eretz Israel, I believe. So yes, he's a Tana mentioned in this same Baraita, which was composed in Eretz Israel, Yeshivat Tevaria, a generation before there was even a Mishnah. So they're two separated in time. So he's saying, if we're going to accept this as legislation in Pumbedita, we're going to add this qualifier. Let me just see what Harambam says about this. Does he say anything? Let me see. Let's see, Mishnah Torah. Here we go. It's going to be in Hilchot Hamul Torah, chapter 6. Maybe I should use Al HaTorah. So I have Microsoft OneDrive because I keep moving from place to place. And it takes time to upload because it's loading from the cloud each and every time. Let's see if I can just get another Google window. Go to Al HaTorah. No, it's not working. All right.
Mechon Mamre also has the good girsa for
Yeah,
him.
and we could do that. That's right. Good. Okay. Here we go. Okay, good. Here we go in Mada. I'll share the screen as soon as I get to it. Hamul Torah 6. Okay, now let me stop sharing. And then where's that window? Here it is. Okay. None of that. Share. Okay. Okay, here we go. Where's that window? I have to get in that window. How do I do that? Here it is. Okay, I should move it. Oh, the other screen. Okay, now we're good. Okay, here we are. So it starts here. Halacha Vav is the kavod required for just a haham. I don't know where that source is, but some of it is related to this because he says Ra'ad Han-Nasi and he's talking about Arba Amot, etc. And then you could sit as soon as he passes. So this is kind of what we have in the Baraita about the haham. And he says Ra'ad Bedin, etc., etc., blah, 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 blah. But this is, if you see them, this Halacha Zayin is when they nichnas to the Bet Midrash. Exactly like the Baraita. Keshe'abedin nichnas, osin lo shete shurot. Happened. Osin lo shete shurot. So does this match better the Paris Girsa? Osin lo shete shurot omdin mekan mekan.
Yes, for a few reasons. If you have Ad Yomar instead of Omer, you also have the Osin lo shete shurot.
Very good.
And you also have the Nun Sofit instead of the Mem Sofit.
Yes. So that's like I said, that's why I see that the Paris is more in the realm of the Gaonic Andalusian texts. It could be Yosheb, by the way. They're adding the Nikudot on their own. They're just guessing.
Yeah, by the way, it also had the Yosheb here.
I
didn't point that out, but one out because it was smaller, and I didn't want to interrupt every line. But yeah,
legal articulation, you don't speak about the past tense. What do you mean v'yashab bimkomo? V'yesheb bimkomo. You're telling you what you have to do. When the haham or the abedin or the nasi enters, you do X, Y, Z, and then you may do A. So I think they get the nikudot wrong a lot.
Sorry, it's interesting. The Paris it has for the abedin ad sheyesheb bimkomo, but then for the hacham, Oh no, sorry, it has Yesheb b'Mekomo.
Okay, that's what I think.
All right.
Yeah, and the Makbili edition also of Mishneh Torah have Yeshib.
Okay, that's what I think is right.
Yashab doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right. ושאר העם יושבים במקומן. חכם שנכנס, כל שיגיע לו ב400 עומד מלפניו, אחד עומד ואחד יושב. That's the wave. עד שנכנס וישב במקומו. Now, בני חכמים ותלמידי חכמים, בזמן שהרבים סליחין להן, that's part 2 of the Baraita, מקפסין. And I also saw that in Rabbeinu Hananel. So I think that's the original text. על ראשי העם ונכנסים למקומן, ואין שבח, I would say, לתלמיד חכמים שייכנס באחרונה. You really shouldn't take advantage of this right. You shouldn't come in last, even though you're allowed to. And I don't know where Harambam gets this, some other sugya. You shouldn't do it. יצא לצורך, חוזר למקומו. No distinction between קטנים and גדולים. So I'm sorry, I was wrong. It looks like he does adopt Rabbah. Then the same thing from the Baraita. בני חכמים, בזמן שיש בהן דעת לשמוע, הופכים פניהן כלפי אביהן. אין בהן דעת לשמוע, הופכים פניהן כלפי העם. תלמיד שהוא יושב, this is another thing, right? This is for private interaction. So the Baraita is really articulated in Zayin Het and the first halacha of Tet, and that's it. And that's why the printed folks stopped the paragraph here and made a new one, but in Harambam's original Girsa, which if we can trust the Yemenites, which I think we can, it's not there. I mean, it's combined. Okay, let's go back to the Sughya.
So Hacham, regarding that line, and Shebach the Talmid Hacham Shikanes Ba'arona.
Yes.
I don't remember where this was from. It may be from Abot, but I'm not sure.
Mhm.
There was a Hacham who said, Mi Yamai Lo Fasa'ati al Rashi Am Kodesh.
Ah, very good.
I forgot who that was, but it might be an Abot, but I'm not sure.
So they may have taken the verb posea, which he used, and projected it over here, and they changed the Girsa. But Rabbeinu Hananel and Harambam has mekapesin, which is more licensed, like I said. Okay, now here we are back. So that's part 1. So we had the Baraita divided into 2 parts. Each part has 3, and then the whole Sugya, part A, has 3 parts. First is the Baraita itself. Second is 2 comments on one piece of the Baraita. The third part is comments on the other of the Rabbi Azar Bar Sadok. Harambam doesn't mention Rabbi Azar Bar Sadok. I don't know why, because Rabbah seems to treat it as valid, right? Otherwise, you don't comment. So I don't know why. Now we move to Yeshivat Tibaria. And then, this whole part B happens in Yeshivat Tibaria. We imported it here into the Sugya and the Babli. Amar Rabbi Yochanan also has 3 parts. This Mishnah comes from the days of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Nasi, Rabbi Meir Chacham, Rabbi Natan Abedin. Even though Rabbi Meir is the number 3, he's listed second. In that Sugya, in Iruvin 53a and b, which Chacham Faor points out about Bnei Yehuda, Nitkayimat Toratam B'Yadam, there's also a discussion of Rabbi Hoshaya and Rabbi Meir in their respective generations. Their colleagues, Lo Yardu Le'omek Da'atam. They were really the geniuses of their day. And the other Hachamim couldn't understand everything that they saw. So I think that's why Rabbi Meir was, although he's number 3, because of Yahos, is Bnei Gerim, and Rabbi Natan has huge Yahos. He's actually a Mizera HaMelucha on the male side. They put Rabbi Meir first, even though his official post was 3rd. And you see, he's kind of the senior Hacham in his interactions with Rabbi Natan, because he's kind of coming up with the conspiracy, and Rabbi Natan is going along for the ride. Ki hava Rabbi Natan Abedin, ki hava ayil Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, habu kaime kule alma mekameh. So when Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel came into the Bet Midrash, everybody stood up. Ki havu ayil Rabbi Meir Rabbi Natan, habu kaime kule alma mekameh. This is the backstory that existed prior to the formulation of that Baraita we opened with. So now you're supposed to immediately recognize the dissonance. So what's going on now? Why are we telling us this? And this is also in Aramit. So the Emoraim are filling in the context, going further backwards in time behind the origin of this Baraita. So everybody stood up for all three. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and here we go. La ba'el mehveh hekera ben dilil vidhu taqin ha matnita. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, don't we need a recognition, hekera, between me and them? So taqin means to fix, also judicially fix, which means generate a tikana. It also means to formulate Tanaitic material. So there's a question in the Igeret Shirira Gaon, Matnitin Ema Itkin, when was the Mishnah Takin? They use this verb Takin. And I think Haham Fa'ur has an appendix, TQN, it's right around this 41 or something, and he goes into the whole story. But that Takin is what you use for Mishnayot also. Also, Tiken Mishalim Harbe from Kohelet, I'm talking about Shlomo HaMelech. He didn't write them, but he edited them and processed them so that they got better. So, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was dissatisfied with the equal kavod that positions 1, 2, and 3 were getting. So he changed it, and each one has a different level of kavod. So everybody knows who's number 1, who's number 2, and who's number 3. Now, this is an interesting fact. The subtext of this sughya is, if you were totally above board, why don't you do it when they're present? So if they want to oppose it, they could present their view, and then we're going to vote on it. He waits until they're gone to interject this new law, which, it'd be okay if there wasn't a prior practice, but we just saw that there was a prior practice. So now you're removing their kavod. That's not so kosher. If from the beginning nobody had anything, and we say, we have to give kavod to the 3 positions of the Beit Din, here's what we're going to do. That's one thing. But once there was a minhag, that's a real minhag, right? There was a judicial practice in the procedures of the Bet Midrash, and you want to change it because you don't think it gives you enough kavod. How do you know it wasn't going on like this in your father's day and your grandfather's day? Maybe this was an old minhag. I think the fact that he hit it and then it got sprung on them, that was part of the motivation. So he has some fault in the matter also.
I have a question.
Yes.
Maybe 2 questions. Is there any reason that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Natan wouldn't be in the yeshiva that day? Like, do you think that sughya is trying to point us to anything, or it's just
no personal?
happenstance?
They took some personal days off, right? And even if you look at the Sanhedrin in the Mishneh Torah, it's also in the Mishnayot, etc. The Sanhedrin has 71 members, but at any time in the Lishkat Hagazit, you only need a quorum. I think you may only need 23. I'm not sure. And then if something big happens, you call the others. But for it to do its general business, which is someone brings a ta'ana from a lower court, the next lowest court, which is the Petah Ha'azara court, you only need a quorum of judges to do judicial business.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
So it's expected, because we didn't pay the Dayanim at all. These positions were not, the Nasi was paid by the Roman government. And that might be part of the animosity that was generated.
Right.
Especially the Yehoshua, right? But people were, if they had to leave, they had to leave. So
wait, and then the second thing I was going to ask, do you mind painting a picture a little of the context here? Like, I guess, where is this in the yeshiva, the Bet Midrash, the Bet Din? What does the room look like?
Yeshiva Tebaria, which functioned as a Bet Din Hagadol. Did
Okay.
they hear lower general jurisdiction cases like, Maneh li biyadecha v'hala omer en li ela biyadecha hamishim? No. Did they hear appeals? Yes, like a Bet Din Hagadol. And their job was to, the 3 functions that Fa'ur always mentions in several articles: receive the Torah Sheba'al Peh from the prior Bet Din, pass it on to the next bedin, and do dinim muflaim, gezerot, and tekanot legislation. That was their job. So they didn't they would only hear a case if it was appealed from the court below. Probably a local city bedin.
So in Tibaria, Yabne is no longer existent.
Right. That's Sanhedrin. So there's that Mishnah or that Tannaitic tradition that says the Galeta Sanhedrin 10 times. The last place was Tibaria. That's why when they made that new Sanhedrin Ka'an, I think they wanted to start it in Tibaria, and there's some Amoraitic material that says that when the Mashiach comes, he'll first appear in Tibaria. What is that?
16th century attempt or the 21st century attempt?
Yeah, I think earlier. So what does that mean? So again, we have to be wary not to be literal. We are bombarded, especially with Lubavitch, and I know because SYs travel the whole world, they're happy to see a Chabad house because they know they can Shabbat and food. But by buying into that, or by benefiting from that, we also legitimize Chabad, and then we give them money and so on. And they are hyper literal. So they have a very Christian notion of Mashiach. It's just Jesus all over again. So what it really means that the Mashiach will first appear at Tibaria. If you read Hilchot Melachim u'Milchamot, the Sanhedrin's job is to vet a Mashiach. That's why in the Amidah, it's Hashiba Shofetenu Kebarishona first, then La Meshumadim Al Tikva. The first job of that Sanhedrin is to deal with the minim, because there's going to be minim everywhere. It's like you have a backyard that you never planted grass. There's a little wild grass, but there's a lot of dandelions and a lot of those prickly weeds and all kind of weeds, right? Because we never had a central body before to police that. So what do? We have to get rid of the minim. Then and only then, et semach David abdecha mehera. Although then you build the temple or build Jerusalem, I think you assert dominion over it. And then and only then, et semach David abdecha mehera tasmiach. So he appears in front of the Bedin Hagadol and has to be approved. That's what it means. The Mashiach will only appear because that's where the Bedin is, or that's where the last one was. So that Imra assumes we're going to reconstitute the new Sanhedrin in Tibaria, and then we could move it to Jerusalem when we arrange Jerusalem better. I think that's what this new Sanhedrin of 20 years ago understood. That's why they said that, but they don't tell you that. They make it seem like the Mashiach just rides in on some hamor and he's the Mashiach. No. He has to be a great hacham. He has to have Ruach HaKodesh. He has to have mastery of all the literature, rabbinic literature. I think he would have to say, "This are the first fixes we're going to make. We're going to make some new dinim muflaim." My opinion. What about this? Can you make tevilah in your bathtub, like we said in the 1920s? What about electricity on Shabbat? Are we going to follow the Hazon Ish and the Prussian rabbis who are reacting to the the maskilim, or we're going to listen to some of those Sephardic voices which were drowned out, which were contemporary, that even like some S&P, there's a guy Toledano, says even on Shabbat, there's nothing wrong with electricity. That doesn't mean computer, but it doesn't mean turn on a light, turn on the fan, open the garage, blah, 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 right? Probably even an electric knife, all these kind of things. So I think the Mashiach is going to be like the Nasi. He has to have an agenda. What do I think we should bring up on the docket? And that is shared with the Sanhedrin, which is priorly constituted. And then they have a discussion, is this guy really our Mashiach? That's what I think it means. So we are misled because you never hear that story. Even though in the Amidah makes it pretty clear, there's a sequence, nobody pays attention. So anyway, that's what I think happened. So Kia tu hazu de lokamu mekamayo kiz regila milleta, I think it's milleta. So when they did show up, the new law was enacted in their absence, and now they're getting a different treatment. Amre Maihai, what's that?
Wait, sorry, I'll jump in a quick girsano. You only have kedrerile, or you don't have milleta there. In the Paris.
I like that's better.
Mm-hmm.
Better. Amre Maihai Amru Lehu. So the whole Bet Midrash, that's why it's plural. Amru lehu, hachi, taqi, Rabban, Shimon ben Gamliel. Well, there was a tekana in your absence. I guess, and they voted yes. I don't know if he could just make one unilaterally. I'm not sure. So that's part one. So they now know something's up. Here's their reaction, part two. Amar le Rabbi Meir le Rabbi Natan. Ana haham ve'at abedin. Natkin, does it say mileta?
One second, I lost it.
It might, and they projected that up to Kidrigila mileta. I think.
Natkin milita, yes.
Okay, so we're going to institute something ourselves. You notice they use the same verb. So he was taking something. We are going to not make it's not the same sense. We're gonna do something to get back at him. I don't know what this next word is, called dalim. I think it means something for us, but I don't know exactly the etymology of kaldalim.
I think in the Steinsaltz that you shared, and presumably in the printed also, it's kildidan. Right?
Yeah.
Like what he did to us.
Yes. I found this in Paris. It feels better, but I don't know the etymology clearly. And I tried to look in the, I love that dictionary of, not Jastrow. I don't like Jastrow, but that other one from Israel. I think he used to teach Sokolau, I think. He used to teach at YU, actually. I was actually in some of his classes in 1978. Then he moved to Israel, I think, and he published these books, which are quite good. And he even draws on Geonic literature. So it's much, much better than Jastrow.
So for that word in the Paris, it's not clear, but it might be two different words. Kaldelin, but the letters are so crushed together for everything, so you can't tell if it's a space or not.
A little fuzzy on that page. Yeah, so we have to look at some. Amarle, Rabbi Natan, my na'avid. So you see Rabbi Meir is really driving the train here. Nemale, gale Oqasin. So I changed the Paris. We go back to the printed based on Fa'ur. Nemale, let's tell him gale Oqasim. Deletle, he doesn't know Oqasim. Bechevan de la gamir nemale, and because he's not gamir even, which is the first level in Oqasin, nemale, we will tell him. Mi malel giborot Adonai yashmi'a kol tehillato. In Tehillim, what's the derasha here? Lemina el malel giborot Adonai. Who has the power to preach giborot Adonai? Only somebody who knows all of them. Like we all say, you want to be a haham, you have to be gamir v'sabir bechol haTorah kula, because it makes a difference. You could be missing something that changes the map. Lemi sheyachol hashmi'a kol tehillot v'na'abre v'tihve ad nasi v'ana abedin.
Sorry, not to jump in and interrupt too much with the Girsat things, but just the second time it quotes that pasuk in the Paris, it tehillato, just like the pasuk, but the other Girsat, like you have here, have tehillotav. Maybe because it's kol, so it kind of changes it to plural.
No, but they can't change a pasuk. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Good.
I guess if you really wanted to, you could read Tehillah as Tehillotav, but
yes, you could.
Right. Yeah.
I think the point though is Tehillah is better because the Tehillah of Borei Olam requires you to master all of the subject. Then you're able to say a Tehillah to Borei Olam. Not that there's many Tehillot that you could piece out, right, like that. Like if you want to study modern physics, you need both relativity and quantum mechanics. If you do one without the other, so it's missing and it doesn't work, and there'll be several phenomena that you can't explain. For example, the solar energy that gets here, for a long time, they measure neutrinos. Well, there's 3 types of neutrinos. I think photon, I forgot the names, so I won't say. But there's 3 of them, and they only measured for the first type because that's how it leaves the sun. But when it gets to somehow on the journey, some of category 1 morph into categories 2 and 3. And only when they did that were they able to say, there's nothing missing. They thought there was some solar energy somehow missing between the sun and here. They couldn't figure it out. Then they did that. So if you don't know, that means that those neutrinos have mass, because in categories 2 and 3, they have mass for it's a whole involved explanation. If you don't know that, your mental map doesn't work. So now in science, we're always changing the mental map because we learn new things with better instruments and we learn better questions, like Faur writes in the Naked Crowd, the 4 levels of Hebrew wisdom. But here, it's similar. You have to know the entire Tehilot Adonai of your day, and then you could be Mashmi'ah Kol Tehilato, the complete praise of Borei Olam, right? Okay. So because he doesn't know Oqasin, we'll kick him out. At Nasi, Ve'ana Abedi Sham'inhu Rabbi Yaakov ben Korsha'eh. I don't know anything about him yet. Amar Dilma Hasbe Shalom Ateleve Kisufa. Could it be that these guys are going to bring a fadiha, a big embarrassment to the Nasi? Azal V'yativ Achore Ilitehed Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Hashad Garas Vetana, like we just studied in 41. Amar Mai Dekama. What's going on here? Dilma Hasve Shalom Ika Midi Be Medrasha. Is it possible? And he knows who it is. He can guess who it is. And they're the only ones who have enough clout to pull this off, right? Because they're going to stand up and say Galelan Oqasin, and he won't. And then one of them will get up and do it, and then obviously the contrast, that will be a whole embarrassment. So he knows who he's directing to.
So in Chacham was reading, what he's saying, if I understand it, is Gale Oqasin means allow it to be published by you doing the recitation.
Yes. So remember, we have these private Geniza-based scrolls, which have some form of Oqasin. But also remember, there were 13 different articulations of the Torah Shebe'al Peh that Bet Dino Shel Rabbeinu HaKadosh drew upon in creating the Mishnayot. One of them was Rabbi Natan's, by the way, which is described as Kab ben Aki. Another one is Rabbi Meir, that was the bedrock. But then he added pieces from other ones. So whenever you see ABC, Divrei Rabbi Meir, what comes after the phrase Divrei Rabbi Meir is from other formulation, not Rabbi Meir. Otherwise, that's why. So Rabbeinu HaKadosh added the words Divrei Rabbi Meir to some Sitam Mishnah of Rabbi Meir's articulation, and then included some other pieces from other places. And sometimes he included implicit references, even though Rabbi Meir's version was explicit, because they just kind of fit together. These kind of issues are described by Hon Ashir, by Rabbi Emmanuel Hayrike, who Faur loved. He was Kabbalistic, no question, but his analysis of the Mishnayot is very fine. And he understands that they were a recited book, and a lot of the words are less clear, but more brief and they rhyme, easier to say. I may have told you before, just 1 minute digression. In Seattle, so we read Bameh Madlikin with the more involved, maybe it's the Damascus version of the Mishnah, the tune for reciting Mishnah. That's the one I learned from Faur. It's a little different than the one those Halabi Hachamim like Tawil recorded in the Jewish National Library, which is more staccato. It was like less music. Anyhow, it's Bameh Madlikin, Ubameh En Madlikin, En Madlikin lo belechesh velo behosen velo bechalaf velo betilat ha'idan. And same like that, same phrasing, just fits the Livorno diamonds if you've ever seen it. And then at the end, Tam is the same ending Tam. So now there's one Mishnah which says, Kehas al haner, Kehas al hashemen, Kehas al petila hayam. Rabbi Yosef, what's the one about lighting? Something. Okay, that's a mental, that's not a bad spirit like in the movies. That's a psychological affect. And Harambam's Pirush HaMishnayot says this is a melancholia. He uses that exact word. These are women who have emotional melancholy, not unlike the patients of Sigmund Freud in Vienna, rich J-dub women who, for whatever reason, were bored and they had melancholia, right? So a lot of his psychology is inferred from their psyches, which is not a good sample set. But anyhow, that's Freud. That's why a lot of people rejected him. Anyway, it says, "O bishvil ha'choleh she'yishan patur." Now, in the Turkish tradition, it's not written anywhere. You had to hear it, and I don't know if they still do it. But when we said that "O bishvil ha'choleh she'yishan," that patur is patur umutar. Whereas in most of the usages of patur in massekheth Shabbat, it's patur abal asur via gezerah. It's a shivut. It's a gezerah. You can't do that rabbinically. This one, although it says patur, which applies to everything in that, the word patur is used in that Mishnah several times. The other ones are patur abal asur. This one is patur mutar. So we say, im bishvil ha'choleh she'yishan, we put a pasek in there. Patur. So I've only heard that among the Turkinos. So we still preserve some of the Torah Sheba'al Peh via intonation, not just words. So, okay. So here, now there's something I didn't put in, but it's in the Paris, which is much better. Yehab da'ateh, I think v'aryen something.
Yehab da'ateh iyen baha ugrasaha.
So that's very good. So he focused. Yehab da'ateh is he focused. Aryen baha is he conceptually, like mentally processed it, right? V'garesaha. So he was able to gores Oqasin. I don't think he necessarily, so he heard Rabbi Yaakov ben Korsha'eh, but I don't think he took notes on exactly what he was reciting. He went and got an Oqasin, and he decided that's the ayun. That's why the Paris is important. He settled on a text for publication. So the ones in the Geniza were more fluid, and the Abedin or the Nasi had, when he gale, now we're going to have a national text. You got to be careful. What are we going to say here? Let's make a text that we can't change it, because if people memorize it and then you change it, it's a whole problem. So he had to do that all that night. He had to get Oqasin, le'ayin baha, how I'm going to articulate this for a public published text. That's not easy to do. Lemahar amrule naite mor v'nitne be'oqasin. Faor seems to have something about galelan, like would echo what they proposed in the conspiratorial discussion, but I don't see it anywhere. If we find it, that would be great. But right now we have naite mor v'nitne be'oqasin. Could sir come up, like that's to come, naite, and teach. This is not tane, but it's nitne. That's the verb matne. We're going to see that used again by Rabbeinu HaKadosh and his son. Faor has a whole thing in Golden Doves between tane and matne, and there's a rabbinic statement. It's preferred to be man de tane, de matne arba'ah, rather than someone who's tane arba'ah. And that means it's better to teach 4 masechtot with the level of matne, which means transmitting the meaning of it, the whole legal theory of everything, as opposed to someone who could transmit to you how to recite 4 sedarim. So that's matne. Patah ve'amar. He was able to, and he did it. Batar de Okim, after he stood up to do all this, because he stands at the head of the yeshiva and recites Oqasin by heart. He has to. His girsa, the one he settled on. Amar lehu, he said to them, which means Rabbi Natan and Rabbi Meir, ila gamirna kasifitina. If I didn't gomer the masechet beforehand, you would have embarrassed me. Hakid afkinhu bemedrasha. He made a command. This is not a vote. This is just his command as Nasi. Those 2 guys are out. Like when I went to Denver Yeshiva when I was 13, they loved to say, and he kicked them out of the yeshiva, right? They love that thing. I don't know why. They want everybody to go to yeshiva, and they have all these stories about getting kicked out of the yeshiva. But he removed them from the Bemedrasha because of the Choser Kavod, because they tried to undermine the authority. If we make the authority hefker, then no one's going to respect the judiciary. I've got this from Paris. So the printed text has 2 things. I think Paris is more correct, that Rabbi Natan and Rabbi Meir would write kushiot for the Bet Midrash to deal with, like seeds of discussions, and throw them in, like by the window. Somebody would have to pick it up and then open the subject. They were probably the seeds of all the discussions before. Amar lehu,
What does shadu mean? They threw it?
to throw.
Mhm.
So it means they threw it into the Bet Midrash. We have this again in the kalot. The audience would throw things up on the stage where the hachamim are, and then it would say nafal pitka. They would pick it up if they liked what they saw, because they're the only ones who can speak at the kalot. This is a session of the Bet Din HaGadol. They would ask the question or make the statement that came on the pitka. If they didn't like it, they wouldn't, right? So it's the same idea. So we always
And so just to help me visualize it, is it from like through a window and they're just sitting
so,
outside?
the window or the front door. So they can't come in. So they're hanging out on the outside, like that story of Hillel, who's looking through the window.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's like that, right?
Hmm.
So they would throw it in. So after a while, people were aware that these are coming, the key elements of the discussion are coming from outside the Bet Midrash. Amar lehu Rabbi Yosef. I don't know which Rabbi Yosef this is. I don't think it's the student of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai because of the time. I think it's another Rabbi Yosef. Amar lehu Rabbi Yosef. He's speaking lehu is to the Bet Midrash, the people inside. Torah mebachus ve'anu mebifnim. So the Torah is really coming from outside, and we're inside. Amar lahen Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. So he didn't direct this directly to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, but that's who he's speaking to. He's telling the audience, what are we doing? The Torah is outside and we're inside. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel got it. So he said, okay, the ayilinhu mihu niknesinhu. He speaks in the third person because he's like royalty. We will let them come back in, but we're going to impose a consequence on them, a kinas. Nobody can quote them by name. Asiku. So what are we going to say for them? So asiku, they probably discussed it, because asiku is the same verb as maskana, the haskin. Rabbi Meir, it's really ahorayim. Well, Rabbi Natan yesh omrim. So Rabbi Meir, that's a big diss. They call him, buttocks. Buttocks say, right? And Rabbi Natan, there's somebody who says, right? Nobody knows that except those of us who study with Fatwa. I don't know why nobody knows that, but ahirim doesn't really make sense. It's a dual. It's not a plural, like ahirim, a whole bunch of people. That doesn't, why is that? I don't know. Doesn't seem to make, it may add to the kabod of Rabbi Meir, like he's like a crowd of hachamim. I don't know. But ahirim is very clear.
Do you know by any chance where that's from? It's not in the Paris, and I looked through the other Girsa'ot. They all said achirim.
No, I just heard it from him. I don't know where he got it from.
Okay.
But we should be able to find it somehow.
Yeah. And also the Rabbi Yosef, maybe Ben Halafta, student of Rabbi Akiba.
That's probably it. I wonder if
I have a little chart here to help out.
I wonder if there's a Girsa that actually names him by full name.
I think he's the default Rabbi Yosef. I think anytime you see Rabbi Yosef, I believe it's him.
Yes, because the other one I was thinking of is Rabbi Yosef HaKohen,
Right.
who Sephardim say is Josephus, by the way. The Ashkenazi world hates Josephus and Philo. I don't even know why. I kind of know it. You remember that guy, Rabbi Bald, used to be the principal of Hillel? He's a dib, doesn't know anything. Doesn't know Derech HaTalmud whatsoever. He's not even like, there are some Ashkenazi soft-spoken intellectuals who try to understand rabbinic literature. He's not one of those. He's like the moxie rabbi, who makes noise, right? He kind of hates Philo. He was teaching about Hanukkah or the Seder of Pesach, and he said some point which was true. And I said, oh, your point is corroborated by the fact that the Lashon for who is an Ani is required to do the Arba Kosot, even if he has to beg, same for Nerot Hanukkah. And then I mentioned that something from Philo or Josephus. And he was immediately defensive and dismissive. Like, he doesn't know anything about the Torah Shebaal Peh. He doesn't have the Masorah. Dude, He has the Mesorah as of the rabbinic generation he was in, which was long before. I mean, Philo was early. Josephus was after he fought in the wars of Bar Kokhba, but still the Mishnah didn't get into existence. That was 134. The Mishnah didn't exist until 180. So there was 2 generations or 3 after that. 3, I believe. That's what the Get It Shira Gaon says. So if you don't know the time axis, you read what Josephus says, and Philo has a section called the Special Laws. Very, very useful. It explains, helps elucidate what's a din mufla and what isn't. He has a whole thing about Pesach and how they did it, and how the head of the household, which would be like the Bet Ab, the oldest elder of that clan, acted like a Kohen on that day. And they even had some people making Korban Pesach in Bamot, public Bamot. And there's a Mishnah about that in Zebahim. It's a whole thing. You can't just dismiss them because they don't match the ultimate conclusion of Rabbana Rab Asher in the year 500. That's ridiculous. But they don't know. They don't have a notion of time, right? So anyway, third part. So both of them saw, after this incident, they're reabsorbed into the Midrash, but they have these funny names. They saw in their dreams, both of them, you should go make up with Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Let's get your names back and we'll be okay. Rabbi Natan Azal, Rabbi Meir La'azal, Amar, Dibrei Halomot, Lo Me'alin, Velo Moridin. That is actually a statement in a Barata in massekheth Sanhedrin. I think it's Daf 30. I'm not sure. I'll look it up, and I'll put it on the chats. But that's Harambam restates this phrase in Hilchot Zechia Umatana, I think chapter 11 or something like that. And I don't know what's the context, but so that's real. Ki Azal, so that's part 1. Ki Azal Rabbi Natan Amarle, obviously Amarle is Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Nehe de'ahane lach kamra de'aruch lemehve abedin. So nehe, it's good, like niha in Arabic. Yeah, it's good, or it's true that your father's sash, kamra is sash. So remember, in those societies, he's talking about the Resh Galuta in Babel. So they dressed not Roman at all. They dressed like Persians, right? And then later like Muslims. So having a sash was a big deal. Like the Kohen Gadol had a long sash, and you had to twirl it around him, right? So it's a fancy thing. That was like our necktie, their sash. It was colored and it was fancy. So it's true that your father's sash, which means your father's authority in Babel as Resh Galuta, that got you to be Abedin. But do you think that your father is Resh Galuta lets you be the Nasi in Roman Palestine? No, we're the ones who were appointed. We're the ones who are the descendants of Hillel. Hillel was also a Babylonian and he came here. We're not less Babylonian than you are, but we're the ones who hold the position. You're not going to take our job away just because your father is Resh Galuta in Baghdad. So number 3. Now we move down a generation, actually 2 generations. So it's the generation of the son of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, but he's teaching the grandson of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. We're going to see who. It doesn't say who's teaching, but we know from the context. That's a Mishnah in Bechorot. It's talking about if you make a timura of a Bechor, neither of them can be offered. So then all of them have to graze until they die, or until they sprout a mum of some kind, which could take a long time. Well, in the old age, of course, because nobody eats them and nobody works them, they're not going to die of natural causes. Kind of, they're like, Yid'aya ad she'ista'eb is the phrase. They have to graze until they become tameh, which means a mum or a terefa, which would be the same thing. So This is a Mishnah in Bechorot, and it says, Amru Mishum Rabbi Meir. This is the final version, which we're not at yet. But the final version is Amru Mishum Rabbi Meir. Ilu haya timura lo haya kareb. That's the Mishnah, right? So that's what Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was teaching his. Oh no, Rabbeinu Hakadosh was teaching his son Rabbi Shimon, who's the grandson of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. This is going to be the third Rabbi Shimon in the Hillel family, but it's now Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, right? Ahoraim omrim ilo haya timura lo hayata kereba. The Mishnah says kareb. I don't know what Paris says. I'm inclined it's not kereba. I'm inclined to say it should be kareb, because that's what the Mishnah says. And we're talking about the Bechor. I'm pretty sure that the He should not be there.
Right. I think they probably put the He because Timura is feminine, but
Yes.
if the Mishnah is referring to a male sheep, then
Yes.
it would still be.
I have Kereva.
Ah, interesting. Okay, that's probably why I put it there. But I don't like it because in Harambam's Girsa is Kareb. And the whole Mishnah talks about Kareb. This is all about Bechorot. So I don't like Kereva, but okay. Maybe to make it rhyme. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Amar lehe. Oh no, sorry. Amar lo. So the son told Rabbeinu Hakadosh, Mihen halalu, shememehem anu shotim, ushmotam and anu mazkirim. This is all in Hebrew. I don't know why, but that's why. He may have wanted to make it a more forceful kushya. Amar lehe. Bnei Adam shebikeshu la'akor kebodach uchvod bet abi. I'm using the feminine ending because I think that's how Hachamim who are intimate with each other spoke, especially father and son. So Rabbeinu Hakadosh still has the sting of it from his father. The grandson doesn't have the sting, right? So these are people who try to erase your kavod and the kavod of your father, our entire line, right? Amar lehe, quoting Kohelet now, gam ahabatam, gam sinatam, gam kinatam, kevar avada. And here's the pasuk there, kevar avada. And by the way, Yisrael Moshe Hazan uses this pasuk in the She'erit HaNahala, which Faur quotes in his, the brown covered book, talking about people in Livorno who caused trouble for the Sephardic tradition, and he puts in the mouth of the Hachamim, okay, but it's over now, it doesn't matter, we can let it go, etc. That's what the sense of it is. When you quote that, you mean, okay, but whether they loved you, whether they hated you, whether they were jealous of you, whatever it is, they're dead, it's all gone. You don't have to perpetuate the mahloket, right? Amar lehe, but Rabbeinu Hakadosh, he still feels the sting. Quotes Tehillim now. Ha'oyev tamu chorabot lanesach. Ha'oyev tamu chorabot lanesach. Ve'arim natashta abad zichram hemma. What this means is the enemy, yes, the sword fighting is over. The battle is over, but lanesach, he's still an oyeb lanesach. It's like Iran. So let's say we have a peace deal. He's oyeb lanesach. It's going to blow up again in 10 years, if not earlier, right? That's why we frustrated with Vance and company and Witkoff and Kushner, because you're not from the Middle East, Baba. You don't get it. Iran talks tough all the time. They don't have anything to talk tough about, but you're intimidated. So go take the gosh darn Strait of Hormuz. How hard is that? You took over the entire Japan. You took over the Philippines. You can't take over that? How hard is it? You put some Marines on both sides, and halasna. If they come, you blow them up to hell. I don't know what the problem. So there's a subtext politically that we're not being shared with us. I don't know what's going on. It could be Pakistan and Qatar and all this, and we're making a mistake getting into bed with them, whatever. And we have to blame Israel to cover up that we're betraying America by getting in bed with Qatar and Pakistan. So anyhow, Rabbeinu Hakadosh quotes the pasuk from Tehillim, more or less, yes, it's all over. They're dead, but the damage they did is forever. We're not going to change the kinas about their names. And by the way, this is the statement about the matne, the event, and then 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, counting this last one. Six into a dialogue with 6 pieces, which means 3 and 3. So that's also meshulesheth, right?
So it doesn't really introduce Rabbeinu HaKadosh, right? It's kind of implied. Matnele.
Because Bere, his son of whom?
Right.
But we're going to see in a minute. You're going to see. And that's why those comments are in Aramit, because the Amoraim are telling you, in case you didn't catch it, who this is about, right? So, Amarle, I'll read this again. Amarle ha'oyeb tamu horabot lanesach. This enemy is forever, even though tamu horabot. Amarle, this is the son, Rabbi Shimon. Dad, that's only when the conspiracy they tried to effect worked, like the case of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Azar ben Azariah and Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer, all of whom ganged up on Grandpa, Rabban Gamliel of Yabne, and they got him kicked out. But nothing happened. You kicked him out. You were able to recite Oqasin. Everybody accepted it. The massekheth was nigle because of you, and you kicked him out, and they have these funny names, right? So Rabbanan, these Rabbanan, and he's using a term of kavod here, Rabbanan, right? La ahanu ma'asai, who their actions didn't work. So let them go already. They're dead. It's just for us to use the real names. Hadar atne, so using the verb of matne. Hadar itne leh ameru mishum Rabbi Meir ilu haya timura lo haya kareva. So he says mishum, but at least he's naming Rabbi Meir, but he won't go all the way. Mishum means I heard it from people who say they heard it from Rabbi Meir, but I don't have a precise tradition like Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab. That's what Mishum is. Amar Rabba, and Rabba got the point, and he's telling all of us in Yeshivat Pumbedita. Afilu Rabbi de'envotnahu, even Rabbeinu HaKadosh was known to be Anav. Hana Ameru Mishum Rabbi Meir, Amar Rabbi Meir, La Amar. He wouldn't go all the way. He wouldn't totally restore Rabbi Meir to his earlier glory. He went 75% of the way and said, Amru Mishum Rabbi Meir. So, and that's how we got this final Mishnah. Before, and I don't know at what point, was this the first Mahadorah or the second after this incident happened? Because he was 25 years old in 180 when they had the first Mahadorah. I don't see him teaching his son, Rabbi Shimon, at that time. So I'm guessing the first Mahadorah had this. And there are ways to tell. I didn't research it, but there are ways to find the first Mahadorah. He would say, Ahorayim omrim ilu hayat tumura lo hayata kereva, or kareb. And in our Mishnah, the Mahadorah Batra, which came out in the year 210, when he was 55, obviously his son was already bar da'at and grown up to some extent. We have Amru Mishum Rabbi Meir. This is the second one. So this sughya is also pointing to the 2 Mahadorot of the Mishnah and how the language would change at the urging of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, which is really at the urging of his son, who said, like, Hajjah already. Let's put it, at least put his name in. And then
Only in this one location, right?
Yeah, and we got that forever now. Now we have Mishum, that's all. So without this sughya, you don't know that it's really Amar Rabbi Meir. It should be Amar Rabbi Meir. But it's better than Ahoraim Omrim Elohei Timura, right? And some Mishnayot still have Ahoraim Omrim. You see that? So that's the whole sugya, and we're long over the time anyway.
One last question, if you don't mind fielding it. So this whole story is introduced with Amar Bi Yohanan.
Yes.
Right. Bimeir Rabban Shimon Gamliel Mishnah. So
which before you ask, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
Why do I think what is?
Why is this coming from Rabbi Yohanan?
So he was in Tebaria, yes?
Yes. They had Eretz Israel had a much more direct knowledge, tradition, lore, imrot, people who were present of what happened in the final generations of the Tanaim. So this Amar Rabbi Yochanan, this was articulated in Yeshivat Tebaria, but the Amoraic version, not the Bedin Hagadol of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. So they know, that's what really gave Rabbi Yochanan kind of a cachet. And some people say he was number 2 to Rab, but above Shemuel. And they would ask him questions from Babel on certain issues like Shechita and so on, Terefot, because he was like a very direct line from Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He, as was Rab and Shemuel, on the Bedino Shel Rabbeinu HaKadosh. So he could have even been present at some point when they did the Mahadora Batra, probably was. But go ahead, ask your question. So that's why our Sughya doesn't have any of this backstory except from traditions via Eretz Israel.
Okay. That kind of answers the question. The question was just which Rabbi Yochanan was it in context. So
Yes. And so that's why you have many statements. So the Yerushalmi is 40% of the Babli. So there was a Yerushalmi through the second generation. And Harambam only quotes the Yerushalmi or makes Pisak Halacha according to the Yerushalmi if there's no Babli on it, through the second generation, which would be Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Amen, Rabbi Aseh. After that, you see names in what we call the Talmud Yerushalmi, but those names are not considered the Talmud Yerushalmi that got incorporated into the Talmud Babli. But half of the people who participated in the Kalot of Rab Asher were the crowd around Rabbeinu, who was Israeli. So in 370, when, what's his name? Constantine, the Roman emperor, made Christianity the official state religion, it was horrible for the Yehudim. So all the Hachamim left en masse. And there's a Sughya in Timura 14b, I believe, that explicitly tells you they brought a caravan of camels, many of them, carrying all the archives of the yeshiva of Tebaria, and they got integrated into probably Yeshivat Sura. So that's another proof in Iyeh Hayam of Yeshiva Moshe Hazan that everything was written. The archives were all written. We couldn't function without archives. The only thing is when you publicly, it means in the Bet Midrash, discussed a Mishnah, you had to know it by heart. But we have, if we study the Timura, you're going to see all the Chachamim of the generation of Rabbi Yochanan. They say, if the older folks had great memories, we forget in a second. So it's like taking your finger and pushing it in like a rubber ball. They use other mustard seeds and a pile of mustard, stuff like that. Elastic objects. As soon as you take your finger out, it goes back to its original place. As soon as you stop studying that masechet, you forget everything. You're on the next one. You don't remember the last one. You don't remember 2 of them ago or 3 of them ago. That's just gezerat hashikha. So obviously, those people who speak that way, and they're the first generation of Emoraim, they had to have written archives, or we'd never have a Talmud. So I don't know why the French have such a fetish that it had to be totally oral. It makes it into a Superman movie. It's part of the anti-Maimonidean strategy is to make magicians and heroes and Superman and sorcerers out of the Hachamim and the so-called rational Hachamim who studied science, and they are therefore undermined. Even Ramban goes so far as to say, and the Rishba goes so far as to say, I think it's in Appendix 65, whoever believes in nature cannot know Torah or denies the Torah, something like that. So we're stuck.
I think it also,
yeah.
I think it also gives them more license to change things.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
If the lines of transmission were always oral, and you say, "Oh, we messed up around here, so we can fix the girsah," it's only based on the worst person's memory in the chain.
Yeah. Okay. And Rashi does change the girsah all the time, but he's changing from a bad girsah to, sometimes he changes the good girsah, but many times he's changing from a bad girsah to a worse girsah. And he didn't have access to the Gemariot Sefaradiot, thanks to people like the Rishba, who made sure that Yosef ibn Megas's nephew brought the entire library of Yeshivat Lucena, collected over 400 years, probably from the 770 when what's his name, Moshe Bar Hanoch, no, not Moshe Bar Hanoch,
Not Torai.
Natorai Nasi showed up and dictated the whole Talmud by heart, orally, but they wrote it. We have massekheth Avodah Zarah of that, and it says the year 770. It's explicit. From then until probably 1250, so 500 years, more or less, 400 and some, over 450 years was collected. Correspondence with the Geonim in North Africa. We need Rabbeinu Hoshiel and Rabbeinu Hananel and Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon, all of that. It was destroyed. No one knows where it is. So we can thank for that. Now there was no good Girsaot, and now you're able to play with it, right? Okay, so that's that. I'm going to probably record the final version with the final phrasing. I'm going to look at the Paris again. I'll look at your document, Elliot. Thank you very much. Now I'll do a final recording, and then we're done with this one. The next one I'd like to study is, we'll do it in Deal, is the fight between the father of this man, where Ahanu Ma'asayhu, they actually kicked him out. That's probably what Rabbeinu HaKadosh was still holding the grudge, because it happened to Grandpa, and it was never the same. We got to be Azar ben Azariah, who was looked at as more Hasid for sure, more dedicated, less concerned about Kavod, even though he was the 10th generation descendant of Arzah HaKohen, which probably trumps, in those days still, it probably trumps Zerah HaMelucha, which the Hillel family was only on the mother's side. I think the daughter of Shefatya or something, who was a brother of David or something like that, some connection like that, this Rabbi Natan and his entire line of the Rashe Galuyot in Babel were direct descendants of King David on the male line, so they were fit to be king. Elazar ben Azariah probably should trump that, because the old law was who goes on the Sanhedrin, first Kohanim, then Leviim, then Yisrael, if we didn't fill up the seats. And when the Maccabees did their thing, the other Hachamim said, no more. We don't want the Kohanim on the Bedin, because they're susceptible to assimilation. But that up until then, it was. So Elazar ben Azariah comes from a time, Azra and his son, when, I don't know if Shimon HaSadiq is their relative or not, but he comes from a time when the Kohanim were the teachers of Torah to everybody. So he probably was looked at with more favor than Rabban Gamliel de Yavne after the controversy. Okay. Oh, he was also involved, by the way, in the Cherem on Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol.
Mm-hmm.
He died as a result of it. So he had the fight with Rabbi Yehoshua, then he has the fight with Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol. He puts him in Cherem, and he dies in a whirlpool at sea. And he says, this is because of my brother-in-law, because Rabbi Eliezer was married to Rabban Gamliel's sister. Imma Shalom was her name. Funny name, right? I mean, ironic, because they didn't have so much shalom, and that family's dealing with the regular.
No, she tried though, right? Like she tries to save his life and fails.
What she didn't try was to talk to the husband and say, can you let go of the grudge? I know they put you in Cherem, blah, 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 blah. We already had the fight with the Yehoshua. Could you maybe she could mediate? She didn't do that. She just said, I'm going to make sure he can never nofel al panav. That's a hard thing to accomplish. He only needs 1 day, as we see. He got 1 day in there, and the guy dies, right? And who took over? Our Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel right here in Horayoth. And another fight happens with the greatest Hachamim of the generation. Not so good. Rabbeinu HaKadosh was different. He was in Votna, so he was much more humble, and everybody recognized it. He didn't try the shenanigans of his father and his grandfather at all. He avoided it to the extent possible. And he put all these guys on his bedin. Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Yohanan, Shemuel, who even though he was 14 years old, and Rabbi Hiya. So everybody who punched at his weight class or more, he was more than happy to include.
I like that the sughya ends with him not conceding, even though his son's asking him to.
Yeah,
As much as because in the earlier strata, he says, "Okay, we'll bring you back, but we're gonna
Yeah.
rename you." He
that's
lets
right.
them back into the Bet Midrash, and then his son's like, "Okay, let's try to make it even a nicer. Give them back their names." He's like, "No, they don't get back their names.
But he gives him a
You,
better
you can't concede. A
Mishul
better name." Yeah.
is much better than Ahorayim Omrim. Right?
Yeah.
It's like saying, Ka'al Tizo, right? It's like it's a real, you're saying that in the Bet Midrash, right? It's really dissing him. And he's Rabbi Meir, the famous Rabbi Meir, so it makes a dissonance, right? All right, that's it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Sorry to I always go over the time because the subject matter, it's not so easy to study a sughya. You got to really get into it, but hope to see you all not this Shabbat, but the one afterwards. And I think I'll either do, so I have two in mind. Both I want to study. The only question is the sequence. One is the problem with the father, Rabban Gamliel Diabne, and the fight with his brother-in-law and Rabbi Yehoshua. And then the other one is this, the other one is also the second round of the fight where they put Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol in Harem. That's in Baba Messiah 58b. It's Tanur Shel Achnai. And then there's this one about Quixote, the one that's in the article Cervantes Talmudisti mucho más. So there's a sughya nidarim, which is very arcane. It's very interesting. There's a Mishnah in Kelim, which discusses, like I said, fraud in people with canes. And that's the backstory of the sughya nidarim. And there's a guy who makes it Ma'ut, and Rabbah catches it. And it shows the Hachamim were not easily, you couldn't sketch them. You couldn't sketch them with fancy talk, which I think modern rabbis, they get sketched by rich people with fancy talk. And they're not discerning, or they look the other way. But so you see these sugyot show the minds of the Hachamim and how they're sharp they were, and sometimes they fight with each other. And you may say it's good, you may say it's bad. That's what happened. And so that'll be the agenda, and I'll let you know. Okay, very good.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
so much,
Thank you very
Hafam.
much.
This is
So if you
excellent.
could send me the recording and the transcript
Yes.
when they're done, thank you very much. Okay, School Mitzvot.
Sounds good.
Bye bye.
Good night.